Welcome to BeFrightened. We tell stories that will keep you up or help you sleep at night. This video contains some extremely dark topics. Viewer discretion is advised. You have been warned. It all started with a curious mind and a desire to understand the mysteries of the internet. I had heard tales of a hidden corner of the web where illicit goods were traded and secrets were kept. The concept was intriguing, but I needed to know more. I began by exploring online forums and discussion groups where enthusiasts shared their knowledge. A cryptic post caught my eye. It mentioned how to access the dark web through a Tor browser and a VPN. Intrigued, I dove deeper into the subject. I spent hours studying tutorials and guides that explained how to set up a secure browsing setup, from configuring my operating system to using a VPN correctly. The more I learned, the more I realized how little I actually knew about this mysterious online world. I began to grasp the basics of encryption, hashing, and digital signatures. It was mind-blowing stuff, but also fascinating. With my newfound knowledge, I finally felt ready to set up a connection to the dark web. I downloaded and installed the Tor browser on my laptop, along with a reputable VPN service. I then configured my browser to connect to the VPN, which would encrypt all of my internet traffic. Next, I launched the Tor browser and waited for it to establish a secure connection to the dark web. The wait was agonizing, but eventually the browser indicated that I had successfully connected to the network. I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation as I realized that I was now part of the hidden world of the dark web. As I navigated through the various darknet sites and forums on the dark web, I began to realize just how vast and complex this online underworld was. There were marketplaces where illicit goods were traded, forums where secret information was shared, and chat rooms where people engaged in illicit activities. It was a wild and uncharted territory, full of risks and uncertainties. But it was also exhilarating, like being on the edge of something new and unknown. As I continued to explore, I stumbled upon a section that seemed to be dedicated to morbid videos. I was immediately taken aback by the sheer variety of content that was being shared on this platform. There were videos of people performing self-mutilation, others showing graphic violence, and even some that appeared to be snuff films. The first video that caught my attention was a young woman who had clearly been the victim of some sort of brutal assault. She was lying on the ground, her body battered and bruised, with blood streaming from multiple wounds. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like nothing I had ever witnessed before. I felt disgusted and helpless as I watched the woman struggle to breathe, her eyes fixed on something in the distance that seemed to be taunting her. As I continued to watch, the video cut to a shot of the woman's face, and for a moment, she looked directly at the camera. Her eyes were sunken, her skin pale, and her expression was one of pure despair. It was like looking into the abyss itself. The next video I came across was a disturbing live stream, not the kind you'd find on YouTube, but a grim reality show featuring a person being held captive in a makeshift cell. The individual on camera was screaming for mercy as they were subjected to relentless physical and psychological torture. I watched in horror as the person on camera was forced to endure extreme pain, their body contorted in ways that seemed impossible. The video was grainy and poorly lit, but the sounds of agony and despair felt very real. As I continued to delve deeper into the dark web, I came across another darknet site, which was hidden behind layers of encryption and misdirection. This site also seemed to be dedicated entirely to showcasing the most disturbing and grotesque videos imaginable. The site boasted a vast library of clips featuring people being subjected to all manner of physical and psychological abuse. I clicked on one video at random, and what I saw made me feel sick. It appeared to be a live stream of a person being slowly dismembered by some kind of industrial machinery. The victim was screaming in agony as their limbs were torn from their body, piece by piece. But that was just the beginning. As I watched in horror, the video cut to a shot of their face. Their eyes had been gouged out, and their mouth had been sewn shut with black thread. It was like looking at a corpse, but somehow even more disturbing. As I continued to scroll through the site, I realized that this kind of video was just the tip of the iceberg. There were countless other clips featuring people being subjected to all manner of cruel and sadistic treatments. One video showed a person being burned alive with some kind of chemical substance. Another featured a group of people being beaten with clubs while they cowered in fear. And yet another depicted a person being slowly buried alive. Their screams were muffled, but the sound of their desperate struggle carried through the air as they suffocated. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. I felt revulsion as I watched these videos, but at the same time I couldn't look away. It was like I was transfixed by some kind of morbid curiosity. The brutality I witnessed was staggering. I couldn't believe that people were capable of such cruelty and violence. It seemed like they had no regard for human life whatsoever. I thought about all the times I had seen videos or heard stories about people who had been victims of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. And now, here I was, witnessing it firsthand on the dark web. I felt trapped and helpless. As I finally managed to close the tab and escape the videos, I realized just how naive I had been. I thought that the dark web was some sort of virtual playground where people could go to indulge in their darkest desires without consequences. But now, I saw it for what it truly was. A place where the most depraved and twisted individuals came to feed their own perversions. And that's when I knew that I had to tell this story. The dark web fascinated me from the start. As a computer science student, I'd heard talk about this hidden internet, a place where anything was possible. My roommate Alex shared my curiosity, so we decided to explore it together. We started cautiously, using Tor to access onion sites. The first few we visited were tame, forums discussing privacy and encryption, but soon we found ourselves venturing deeper. We discovered marketplaces selling everything imaginable: drugs, weapons, fake IDs. It was all there. We didn't buy anything, but the mere possibility was thrilling. We spent hours browsing, marveling at this underground economy. One night, we stumbled upon a hacking forum. Users shared techniques, traded software, and offered services. We created accounts and started participating, eager to learn. Our skills improved rapidly. We learned about exploiting vulnerabilities, cracking passwords, and covering our tracks. It was exhilarating to put our knowledge into practice. A user named Shadowkeeper noticed our progress. They private messaged us, offering a job, breaking into a small company's server to retrieve some files. The pay was substantial. We debated the ethics, but ultimately agreed. We could do with the money. The hack went smoothly. We got in, found the files, and got out undetected. The rush was indescribable. Shadowkeeper was impressed and offered us more work. As our skills grew, so did our ambition. We started taking on more complex jobs, each one pushing our abilities to the limit. One client hired us to infiltrate a major tech company's development servers. We spent weeks planning, studying their security protocols, and looking for weaknesses. During that hack, we found something we weren't supposed to see: plans for a revolutionary new product. We knew it was wrong, but the temptation was too strong. We copied the files, thinking we could sell them for a fortune on the dark web. That decision changed everything. Buyers were willing to pay a heap for what we had, but we also noticed signs of someone attempting to de-anonymize us. Someone was trying to track us down. We started looking over our shoulders in real life, not just online. The dark web wasn't just a game anymore. It had real-world consequences. We sold the stolen information. The money was more than we'd ever seen. It went to our heads. We took on bigger jobs. During one job, we found dirt on politicians and business leaders. Bribery, embezzlement, worse. We realized we could ruin lives with a few keystrokes. We didn't know what to do with this information. Release it? Blackmail them? Use it as insurance? Before we could decide what to do with the sensitive information, we noticed sophisticated attempts to correlate our various dark web activities. Someone was trying to connect the dots between our different pseudonyms and transactions. Whoever was after us wasn't just skilled, they were persistent. We started offering our services. People hired us to steal information, change records, plant fake data. We told ourselves we weren't really hurting anyone. We drew the line at anything life-threatening, but our morals were getting fuzzy. We delved into other dark web activities too. We joined invite-only forums where hackers shared zero-day exploits. We explored the world of cryptocurrency mixing, learning to launder our digital earnings. The deeper we went, the more we saw. There were corners of the dark web that horrified us. Places selling illegal weapons, exploiting vulnerable people. We avoided these areas, but their existence weighed on us. We became paranoid about our security. We used multiple layers of VPNs, encrypted all our communications, and never accessed the dark web from home. We created elaborate online personas to mask our real identities. Our skills grew to the point where we could breach almost any system. We prided ourselves on never leaving a trace. In the dark web community, we were respected and feared, but the constant secrecy took its toll. We withdrew from our real-life friends, spent less time in classes. Our whole lives revolved around our dark web activities. One day, Shadowkeeper contacted us with an unusual request. They wanted us to delete some files from a server. This felt different. More dangerous than anything we'd done before. We tried to back out, to tell Shadowkeeper we were done, but they threatened to expose everything we'd done. We were trapped in a world we no longer wanted to be part of. One night, Alex disappeared. He left a cryptic message about needing to go off-grid. I knew I had to do the same. I abandoned everything. My studies, my family, my future. Now I'm constantly on the move, using my dark web skills to stay hidden. But I know they're looking for me. The dark web that once thrilled me now terrifies me. I've seen the power it holds, the lives it can destroy. I don't know if I'll ever truly escape it. I'd started using the dark web for my drugs when I was still young and dumb. It was around 15 years ago, and the internet was in its early days. Well, comparable to what we have today at least. I'd grown quite partial to weed in high school, and by college I was exploring other substances like cocaine and heroin. Now my suppliers weren't always that reliable. and their prices not very negotiable, so I turned to the dark web for a change. I had managed to find a decent supplier online. We had arrangements where they'd send stuff in the mail and hide them in small packages, sometimes inside toys, other times stuffed inside food packaging. It was all very interesting, but then one day, the regular seller that I'd been dealing with for the past few months told me he could do a big drop if I was interested. He said he'd be in the area, and I could meet him to pick up a large quantity of goods. He mentioned that it would require $1,000 cash, which was still a significant amount, but when compared to what I usually paid on the street, this price seemed like a steal. Normally, the cost for the same product would have been around $14,000. I stood in the deserted alleyway, my eyes scanning the dimly lit alleyway for any sign of him. The only sound was the distant hum of lone cars driving by every few minutes. It was 3 a.m., and I had withdrawn the $1,000 from the ATM to make sure the deal went smoothly. As I waited, my mind kept thinking over worst-case scenarios. What if he didn't show up? What if it was a setup? The more I thought about it, the more anxious I became, and the more I wanted to back out. It wasn't until around 3:30 in the morning that I saw him walking towards me. He was wearing a hood, and his pace was quick and purposeful. He saw me and stopped, and then he beckoned me from underneath a signpost to come to him. I made my way over, feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation. He opened up his hoodie, revealing a scrappy young guy with a few days' worth of stubble. "Come on, where's the money?" he said, handing me a bag. My eyes bulged as I took it. This was exactly what I'd been expecting. I reached into my pocket, withdrawing the wallet containing the $1,000. But as I handed it over to him, his expression changed. He started furiously counting the notes, and then got angry. "This is only $1,000, he yelled. I tried to reason with him, explaining that I had already withdrawn the money from my account, and that this was the amount that we agreed upon. But he wasn't having any of it. That's when I noticed someone approaching us from behind. A tall figure was walking towards us, their eyes fixed intently on me. It was only as they got closer that I realized it was a woman, and she was holding something in her hand. Suddenly, the guy grabbed my arm tightly. "Hey, why didn't you have the whole amount?" the woman asked, her voice low and menacing. Then, the guy beside me whispered something in my ear before everything went black. I woke in the alleyway as the sky lightened. My head throbbed, and my thoughts were a jumble. Sitting up, I tried to make sense of it all. My mind was reeling from the events that unfolded. The bag beside me contained nothing but flour. It dawned on me then that I'd been set up. The seller had just wanted to rob me, and there was no way he intended on giving me any real deal. I couldn't believe it. I'd lost $1,000, and now I felt like an absolute moron. I thought about all the times I'd made deals online and how often they'd fallen through. The guys who promised me the world but delivered nothing but empty promises. And now, it seemed like this guy had been one of them. I knew one thing for sure: I'd never make the same mistake again. As they say, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Words to live by. My world got turned upside down by the dark web. It started with an anonymous tip on some surface web forum. Someone had posted a cryptic message warning me that my personal info was being sold on, well, not exactly the open market, but somewhere underground. At first I thought it was just a prankster trying to freak me out. but the message was too specific, too detailed to be a random joke. I'd heard about the dark web before, that shadowy part of the internet where all sorts of illegal stuff goes down. Never thought I'd have a reason to venture into it myself, but there I was, about to do just that. The tipster had included a string of random-looking characters. An onion address, I learned later. That was my ticket into this digital underworld. I installed the Tor browser bundle on my laptop, which allowed me to browse the darknet anonymously using the Tor client. I launched the Tor browser, which automatically connected to the Tor network. This network routes internet traffic through multiple relays, volunteer-run servers scattered around the world, making it extremely difficult for anyone to track my online activities. To access a specific darknet site, I entered its onion address into the Tor browser's address bar. Onion addresses are unique, human unreadable strings that serve as a URL for a website on the darknet. The site would then load in my browser, and I could interact with it just like any other website. The site was called Identity Bazaar, and that's when I saw it. My own profile, my intimate photos, personal details, everything was there. The anonymous tipster, as it turned out, was a white hat hacker who'd infiltrated the Identity Bazaar. They'd stumbled upon my info and felt compelled to warn me. I later learned they'd tipped off others too, but most dismissed it as a prank. As I scrolled through the listings, I saw something even more disturbing. My closest friend's details were being sold alongside mine. Tanya's personal details, Corey's financial history. It was like our whole lives were being auctioned off. And what really creeped me out was that there were all these compromising photos and videos of us, from parties, intimate gatherings, and even just hanging out in our PJs. Yes, we were very, very close friends back then. The countdown continued to tick away, and I felt my world spinning out of control. I knew I had to do something, but what? And who would believe me? I sat in front of my computer, the digital auction site still open on my screen. The thought of our personal details being sold to the highest bidder was disturbing. I tried calling Tanya and Corey, but they didn't pick up. I sent them another message, this time asking if they'd received any suspicious calls or messages. There was no response. Days later, I'd learned that Tanya had been camping with family, oblivious to the unfolding chaos. Corey? Well, we'll get to that. The auction site continued to update, with the countdown doing what they do, counting down. I knew I had to do something, but what? The police seemed uninterested, and my closest friends were nowhere to be found. I had access to Corey's laptop. He had left it at my place. I was going through his browsing history when I stumbled upon a private chat conversation on Facebook. It was with someone named Dark Echo, and dated back to a few days prior, around the time we had last spoken, but before he stopped responding. I then wondered what had Corey got himself involved in, and whether Tanya knew about it too. I decided to take a closer look at the messages between Corey and Dark Echo. As I scrolled through them, I noticed that they were discussing the Identity Bazaar. I kept scrolling through the messages, looking for any hint about what Corey had gotten himself involved in. The more I read, the more I suspected that Corey might be somewhat involved in giving Dark Echo, Tanya and I's personal details, and intimate photos and videos. The chat conversation was full of deleted messages from Corey, like he was trying to cover his tracks. But the responses from Dark Echo, things like, "Thanks, got the spicy videos." The last message from Corey was, "Now can you delete my info?" His message was unread. I gathered all my findings and approached the authorities with caution. This time, they listened intently, their expressions serious as we worked together to unravel the tangled threads of this complex case. The investigation moved quickly after that. Cybercrime specialists were brought in, tracing the digital breadcrumbs we'd uncovered. Within weeks, they'd identified the main players behind the identity bazaar. It turned out to be a small but sophisticated ring of hackers operating across several countries. The authorities launched coordinated raids, seizing servers and arresting key members of the group. The identity bazaar was shut down, its databases confiscated. But the damage was already done. Countless identities had been compromised, mine included. As for Corey, he was picked up while trying to cross the southern border. Turns out he'd gotten in way over his head, manipulated by the real masterminds. He's facing charges now. As for our friendship, well, that's a casualty I'm still coming to terms with. But the aftermath was just as intense. I had to deal with the fallout from my own identity being stolen and sold online. It was indeed a nightmare come true. People I trusted, including friends and family members, started reaching out to me, telling me they'd received strange messages or emails that seemed to be linked to this auction site. I was stuck in digital limbo, unsure who I could trust or what to do next. As I navigated this digital nightmare, I realized it had fundamentally changed me. The experience pushed me to my limits. This ordeal opened my eyes to a harsh truth. Our digital lives are far more interconnected and vulnerable than we realize. We imagine ourselves as safe behind the screens, but the truth is, our digital identities are more vulnerable than ever. And that's a sobering thought to confront. And if you're thinking that this is just a story and not to be taken seriously, think again. The digital auction house may have been shut down, but there are many other underground digital auctions still operating. So, next time you use your personal details online, your personal details might be more vulnerable than you think. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback, feel free to leave it in the comments below. If you have a story you'd like to share or need to contact us for any reason, you'll find our email address in the video description.